everyone, I'm Heather. I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a yoga student. I have been practicing and teaching yoga in New England for over 20 years, and today I want to talk to you about downward facing dog. Downward facing dog is a great pose. In the style of yoga that I teach, vinyasa or flow yoga, power yoga, we do a lot of downward facing dogs. So it's important that downward dog works for you and works for your practice. I can remember taking a class way back when I first started and hearing the teacher say, downward dog should be a resting pose. And I remember thinking, are you kidding me? This is so hard. This is not a resting pose. It was uncomfortable. It was challenging. It felt like a struggle. Today, I hope I can give you some tips and some suggestions that you can try in your practice, in your downward dog, so that it is more comfortable for you, so that you feel more steady, so that you can enjoy your downward dog more and then enjoy your whole practice more. This is me and my downward facing dog. Remember, I have been practicing yoga, practicing downward dog for over 20 years. It's okay if your downward dog doesn't look like my downward dog. It's okay if your downward dog doesn't look like anyone else's downward dog or any pictures you've seen before. What really matters is that your downward dog does work for you, that it feels good, that after some practice, it does start to feel like a resting pose, that it does become something that you can enjoy. When you're setting up your downward dog or any other pose, you want to take a look at the parts of your body that connect to the ground. The parts of your body that are connecting to the ground are your foundation, and they're really important. In your downward dog, your hands and your feet are on your mat. Let's start with your hands. When you set up your downward dog, and you can do that now, you can come into your downward facing dog, set your hands on your mat and take a look at your hands. Your hands are near the front end of your mat, and your feet are near the back end of your mat. And you can play around with just how much space you have between your right and left hand. You can play around with how much space you have between your hands and your feet. When you set your hands and you set your feet, your hips come up. Your hips will be the highest point in your body, and your body will create this upside down letter V shape. How do you create this upside down letter V shape? You set your hands near the front of your mat. You set your feet near the back of your mat. You lift your hips up. Low belly draws it up. You can always draw your low belly up. Just gives you a little more stability. And then you can explore starting to bring your chest really gently towards your thighs. So not forcing your chest back, but decreasing the space between your chest and your thighs. Depending on what you have going on with your low back and with your hamstrings, you might have to put a really big bend in your knees. That might be something that you play around with. And your heels, don't even worry about trying to get your heels down to the ground. My heels don't touch the ground when I'm in my downward facing dog. When you come into your downward dog, after you set your hands and you feel that out, and then you lift your hips and you set your feet, you can play around with this a little bit farther apart, maybe a little bit closer together. My feet are definitely closer together than hips width distance. You can play around with this bend in your knees, a big bend, maybe a little bend, maybe just some softness. You might bend one knee and then the other. That will help you lengthen out through the backs of your legs. But don't force it, don't push it. You can also notice when you come into your downward dog, are you up on your tiptoes, which just takes a lot of work. Your heels don't have to touch the ground, but you can also let your heels soften down. What I sometimes see when people are playing around with their downward dog is that they're not quite in downward dog and they're not quite in high push-up. They're somewhere in between. This is my downward dog, and this is my high push-up or my high plank. What I sometimes see is people who are somewhere in between both of those poses, which is really a lot of work. High push-up is definitely work. With time and with practice, downward dog can be a resting pose. If you're spending a lot of time here, somewhere in between, it's going to be a lot of work and it's not going to feel comfortable and it's going to start to take its toll on your shoulders. Feel it out. Set your hands, set your feet, feel what muscles need to be engaged and what muscles you can allow to soften. If you haven't tried it yet, go ahead, come on into your downward facing dog. Let's try it together. Set your hands on your mat, take a look at your hands, spread your fingers wide. Can you feel the undersides of your knuckles touching down to your mat? You can walk your feet back a little bit. Maybe you walk your feet a little closer so you can bend your knees more. Let your hips come higher. Notice if you're holding your head up. You can lift your head to look at your hands, but then notice if you keep holding your head up, can you let your head hang between your arms? If this feels pretty steady, you can walk your feet back. Let there be a lengthening through the whole back body, your arms, your back, the sides of your body, your legs. Notice if your toes are scrunched up. You can even spread your toes apart. You might lift them up and then softly place them back down again. I think it's also worthwhile to remember that our bodies are always changing. There's always stuff going on. What works today in your downward dog may not work tomorrow, even as you make your way through a practice. What works in the beginning might not work in the end. Pay attention. Pay attention to your body. Pay attention to how your body feels. Pay attention to your breath. Your breath, just like your hands and your feet in your downward dog, your breath is a huge piece of your foundation. So if you find yourself in downward dog and you're having a hard time breathing, ease off, come into child's pose, or simply bring your knees down to your mat. Thanks for joining me, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm Heather. You can find me as The Bent Yogi on Instagram. My website is thebentyogi.com. I am the owner of Sanctuary Power Yoga in Northwest Connecticut, and my studio website is sanctuarypoweryoga.com. We offer classes in studio and online. If you did enjoy this video, please be sure to like it, add some comments below, and subscribe. I will see you all very soon.